Dear members, please consider this short presentation in relation to the three applications which are before you at this week's Planning Committee meeting. All of these developments are in the Ouse Valley and are accessed via the C7 unclassified road which connects the town of Lewes with the villages of Kingston, Swanborough, Iford, North East, Rodmell and South East. The C7 is a minor road connecting Lewes and Newhaven. The main route between Lewes and Newhaven is via the A26 trunk road on the other side of the river. This short video sets out a plea for the provision of cycle and walkway paths along the C7 in aid of the safety of non-vehicular users. It also lays out the concerns relating to intensive farming. You are being asked to consider three developments at this meeting, but there is also a development for which the National Park is responsible being considered by the Lewes District Council on behalf of the National Park at Kingston Garden Centre. The Garden Centre application will dramatically increase the retail floor space, thus creating a major out-of-town shopping centre, and in the process increase HGV and other traffic on the C7 and the road through Kingston. The fifth development was given planning permission back in 2015 following a successful appeal to allow a so-called farm centre development in a tall 1,000-metre size building, which will also effectively provide yet another out-of-town shopping centre. All five of these developments would add considerably to the HGV and other traffic on the C7, and yet at the same time there is no solution offered for the safety of pedestrians and cyclists. However, firstly, may I refer to the main development at Iford, which was previously considered by your committee and refused in 2022. If this development is built, it could easily be made redundant by the effects of climate change in the south of England in the next decade or so. As the Iford estate recognised in their latest newsletter, 2020 was a disastrous year for crop yields because of the extremes of weather, both drought and long periods of heavy rain. Nationally, such reports are becoming commonplace when compared with the effects of weather conditions in the south of England to the rest of England. If these extremes of weather continue, this development of a large intensive farming building or buildings could be obsolete within a decade or so. It's uneconomic to irrigate fields, and no amount of pesticides and fertilizer spraying will rectify the problem. Apart from the headlined image from the Guardian newspaper of last year, the other three photographs on this slide have been taken from the C7 road looking over the Iford estate fields in the last few days. By this time in mid-April, the grain crops should look a healthy green. One only has to look at the growth in the number of vineyards in the south of England for proof that our climate is changing. Indeed, you have an item on your agenda concerned with viticulture because of the growth of the vineyards in the South Downs National Park. But don't believe me, look at the research. Here is one such example from the researchers at the Institute of Physics, which demonstrates the concern about future crop yields in the south of England. Should we be giving planning permission for industrialised buildings in the countryside when a completely different approach to agriculture is needed? Perhaps there is no need for the main development at Iford. However, you have the applications before you, and no doubt a decision will be reached. As raised at the last time you considered this application, one wonders if the location of the agri-industrial business on a narrow road in the Ouse Valley is the right place. Surely the Iford Estate Farm could consider siting such a development at Turring Neville on the A26 trunk road. Wouldn't this be a better location? HG vehicles could go to and fro this location without rumbling through the villages and jamming up the narrow chicane near the Swan Pub in the Lewes Conservation Area. Despite this part of East Sussex being in the National Park, there has been a considerable amount of development of non-agricultural activities in the Ouse Valley. Just before the park was created, and whilst the park was an ANOB, even planning permission was given for an airfield on some dubious evidence. Both before and after the national park was formed, both warehousing and commercial and industrial developments were established. The holiday lodges, which were given permission by the national park in 2016, have not produced the rights of way to the east to access the footpath on the River Ouse. The dark skies policy seems to have been set aside, as these lodges can be seen at night very clearly from Lewes. The resulting effect of all these developments is ever increasing traffic, including HGVs, on the narrow C7 road and the chicane in Lewes at the Swan Pub. As in the previous application, which your committee refused in 2020, the main site will be expanded with further buildings, together with a concrete hard standing and an access road. The developer says there is no further traffic to be expected. Why then would one build a separate access road? However, more importantly, expanding these highly visible buildings goes against the landscape-led policies of the national park and purpose one of the statutory obligations of national parks, which in turn are supported by the Sanford principle. By the way, a similar development in Bramdean, Hampshire, was finally given permission last year by the national park, but a judicial review notice was served, making a legal challenge to the national park's decision. Now turning to the Egrets Way. Currently, and pre-existing any of the Egrets Way developments over the last few years, one should be aware there is already a very good right-of-way along the embankment of the River Ouse between Lewes and the outskirts of Piddinghoe, where walkers can pick up a bridleway which takes them on through the village of Piddinghoe and along the riverbank to Newhaven. Members, you have a recommendation before you to give permission for the development at Iford. One of the incentives for giving this permission is that a further section of Egrets Way will be built. As was said last time, the Egrets Way project could go ahead without any connection to any other development. Contracts were nearly exchanged in 2015, but for some reason the Iford estate withdrew from the deal with the Egrets Way Trust. Now it looks like the principles of the national park policies are being sacrificed in order to guarantee another section of the Egrets Way. It seems a heavy price to pay for a section of pathway. On top of that, there is a section of pathway which is already built, over which there is a restriction by landowners that it should not be surfaced, which makes it impassable in wet weather. Also, there is a section of the path which has not even been planned or built. This section near Piddinghoe is very contentious and may well take many years to agree before it can be built. As a recreational leisure route, the Egrets Way is a great idea. Sadly though, the original desire to provide access for mobility users seems to have not been implemented so far. Also, there is a perfectly good footpath on top of the riverbank, which is well used and many people prefer to use as it gives them a better view along the river. Because of the focus on the Egrets Way, the possibility of a Section 106 agreement to improve cycling and walking along the C7 seems to have been forgotten. Because of the location of all of these commercial and agri-industrial developments, the situation in Lewes is almost intolerable. The C7 is supposed to have a 7.5 ton weight restriction, with access being automatically granted for premises on the route. The weight restriction is now pointless. We feel sad that no consideration has been given to the residents in Lewes or the fact that the route of the HGV from the C7 travels through the Lewes Conservation Area along a very narrow road. The small map in this slide here shows the large number of listed buildings around the Swan corner. Recently, one of these buildings was hit by a large articulated lorry, meaning the road was blocked and repairs had to be carried out to the listed building. Increasingly, developments on the C7 will mean the risk of damage to buildings and the risk to pedestrians is increased. And it's not just pedestrians who live around the Swan Pub. Residents walking their children to school from the Cranedown estate will also have to negotiate this dangerous set of bends. And what of unaccompanied older children? They should be able to walk to school safely without the terror of speeding traffic and HGVs. It looks as though the National Park are going to permit these developments in the Ouse Valley. If that is the case, why not have a 106 agreement to create a safe cycling path and footway along the C7? Okay, it won't be for the continuous length of the road, but it would certainly go a long way to improve safety. Cyclists especially should be given the right to travel safely on our highways. The Egrets Way is not an alternative. In the summer of 2020, the government published its plan to get Britain cycling and walking, entitled Gear Change, a Bold Vision for Cycling and Walking. The government are encouraging us to walk and cycle, so why not provide the means by which it can be done safely? The current road has a speed limit of 50 mph. The county council say there haven't been enough fatalities or serious injuries to justify lowering the speed limit. Should we be living in a society where there's got to be a death before safety measures are implemented? A lower speed limit and traffic calming is needed now. Cycling is growing in popularity and is encouraged by the government. Local councils and the National Park need to respond in their planning and investment decisions. Indeed, East Sussex County Council in their recent cycling and walking strategy identified part of the C7 which should be allocated as a safe cycling and walking route. Whether or not the Egrets Way ever gets completed, cycling along the C7 should be made safer. Also, the National Park should try and prevent villages being isolated car-only places where residents can't board safely a bus, where they can't connect with other villages without using the car, or enjoy their basic rights under the Highway Code to move along the road because of the speeding traffic and HGVs traversing narrow country lanes. The above shows you two photographs. The left-hand photograph shows you an off-road cycle path constructed some while ago near Berwick in East Sussex. The right-hand photograph shows you the type of off-road facility that could easily be constructed along the C7. If such a footpath is created within the field. These fields are owned by the Iford estate. Please would you modify the officer's report requiring a Section 106 agreement to be reached with the developer for the provision of a cycle path and a walkway along the C7 from the outskirts of North Ease through the parish of Iford and to the hamlet of Swanborough. Thank you. Thank you for your time.